thing, being married to Elvis Presley, you don't really know what you're getting into, especially when you're younger.
Pastor Bob Joyce, furious at Priscilla Presley. After false accusations, what if Elvis Presley never really died? Some fans believe a pastor named Bob Joyce from Arkansas is actually Elvis, living in secret. Bob lives a quiet life, preaching and helping his community. But his deep, soulful voice and familiar looks started a wave of rumors online. Videos went viral and whispers turned into real questions. Even Priscilla Presley spoke out strongly against the idea. But Bob didn't argue. He stayed calm and faithful. While he never claimed to be Elvis, his presence made many wonder. Is it just a coincidence? Or is there more to this story than we know? Before long, side-by-side videos appeared all over YouTube. Is Pastor Bob Joyce really Elvis Presley in disguise? The titles were clickbait gold, but the reactions? Surprisingly sincere. Some fans broke down in tears, convinced they were witnessing the King, still alive, still singing, but this time about salvation. Bob, meanwhile, kept doing what he'd always done. He preached, he prayed, he led his worship team. But behind the scenes, the chatter was growing louder. Fans traveled from across the country to hear him sing. Some wept in the pews. Others stood at the back just staring, stunned by what they saw. For Bob, it was baffling. He never claimed to be Elvis. He never hinted at it. If anything, he avoided the spotlight. But the comparisons kept piling up. The timbre of his voice, his mannerisms, the resemblance, the coincidences seemed too exact for some to ignore. And the internet? Well, it never lets a mystery die quietly. Soon, clips of Bob's sermons racked up millions of views. TikToks dissected his facial features. Reddit threads analyzed his vocal phrasing. Conspiracy videos linked timelines, trying to prove Elvis had faked his death and returned as Pastor Bob. At first, Bob brushed it off. He joked gently about it, told his congregation to stay focused on Christ, not conspiracies. But the rumors kept coming. Each week, more strangers showed up, not for scripture, but for a glimpse of something they couldn't explain. Imagine being a pastor, pouring your heart into ministry only to be seen as someone else. Someone who lived a life full of fame, chaos, and tragedy. Someone whose shadow never really faded. Bob didn't ask for it. He didn't welcome it. But he tried to rise above it. That's the part most people miss, his humility, the quiet dignity with which he carried the weight of a rumor he never started. He didn't cash in. He didn't sell books or do interviews to boost the myth. He stayed grounded, steady, committed to his faith and his people. And yet, week after week, people whispered, "That's him. That has to be him." Bob never snapped, never lashed out. But you could see the weariness in his eyes, the burden of being misunderstood, of having your identity questioned day after day. Still, he never let it steal his joy. He sang, he smiled, he preached, and just when it seemed like the buzz might finally die down, something happened that made it all boil over. Priscilla Presley, Elvis's ex-wife, the woman who knew him better than anyone, broke her silence. And what she said? It didn't just reignite the rumor, it turned it into a firestorm. A firestorm that would force Pastor Bob Joyce to respond, not just as a pastor, but as a man pushed to his breaking point. But how do you respond to someone accusing you of living a lie? Well, if you're Bob Joyce, you do it with faith, not fury. And that's when everything began to change. At first, it felt like a whisper, a passing comment, a subtle nod. But the weight behind Priscilla Presley's words hit like a freight train. She didn't name him directly. No point and shout, no finger in the chest. But the message was unmistakable. In an interview, when asked about the growing rumors that Elvis might still be alive or that a certain pastor in Arkansas could somehow be him, Priscilla didn't laugh. She didn't brush it off. She straightened her shoulders and said, almost too calmly, "People need to let Elvis rest. Let him rest." 3 words. But for those who believed, they felt like a slap. It wasn't just a denial, it was a dismissal. And whether she meant it that way or not, the fans heard something sharp beneath the surface. Some read it as grief resurfacing, others saw it as a veiled warning, and a few thought it was fear. Why would Priscilla Presley, who had stayed mostly quiet through decades of conspiracy theories, suddenly step in now? Maybe it was about legacy. After all, she'd spent most of her life protecting Elvis's name, shaping his story, preserving his image. Maybe she was tired of the whispers, tired of strangers assigning meaning to a life she knew intimately. Or maybe it was personal. Because if thousands of people believed her ex-husband was still alive, living under a new name in a small church pulpit, what did that say about her grief, her loss, her truth? This wasn't just about Pastor Bob Joyce. It was about what he represented, the resurrection of a man whose death Priscilla had lived through in real time. Her words rippled fast. Within hours, forums lit up. Priscilla shuts down Bob Joyce rumors. Queen of Graceland speaks out. The Elvis believer community took it hard. For many, it felt like betrayal. Some had spent years clinging to hope. Hope that Elvis had escaped the chaos, the drugs, the fame, that maybe, just maybe, he'd found peace and purpose through faith. And now, the one woman who had once been closest to him was saying, "No, let it go." Bob Joyce heard about it the same way most people did, through the online noise. Someone emailed him the article. Another sent a clip. At first, he didn't even want to watch it, but eventually he did. He sat quietly, listening to her voice. And when it was over, he didn't shout. He didn't post. He didn't push back. He prayed. Because how do you react when someone calls your life a lie, even if they don't say your name? For Bob, it was heartbreaking. He wasn't playing a part. He wasn't chasing a legacy. He was just trying to serve God. And yet, here he was, caught in the crosshairs of a grief he didn't create and a legacy he never claimed. Still, something deeper stirred beneath the surface. What if this wasn't just about truth versus fiction? What if this was about something more human, more raw? Was Priscilla Presley trying to protect something? Or bury it? And as the internet chose sides, Bob made his choice too. He chose silence. For now. But the world, it wasn't ready to move on just yet. You'd expect a man accused, indirectly or not, to come out swinging. Denials, defenses, maybe even a press release. But Pastor Bob Joyce didn't do that. After Priscilla Presley spoke out, Pastor Bob Joyce didn't respond with anger or blame. Instead, he preached about peace, quoting the Bible. Do not repay evil with evil. He stayed calm on the outside, but behind the scenes, things got intense. Supporters sent kind words and compared his voice to Elvis's, but critics demanded answers, accusing him of misleading people. Online debates exploded. Bob could have denied the rumors directly, but he didn't. He knew that would only fuel the fire, so he focused on his faith. In a sermon, he simply said, "Only God can define who I am, and that's enough." And yet, beneath those words was pain, because being misunderstood isn't just frustrating, it's lonely. Bob wasn't angry, but he was tired. Tired of being seen as a symbol instead of a person. Tired of having strangers assign him a story he never wrote. And still, he stood in grace. The backlash didn't break him. If anything, it refined him. He preached harder, sang louder, hugged longer after services. His church became a sanctuary not just for worship, but for confusion, for people trying to reconcile what they felt with what they were told. Because the line between myth and man had blurred, and at the center of it all was Bob Joyce, faithful, unshaken, and maybe a little heartbroken. But the story doesn't end there, because when fame knocks once, it often comes back louder. And the next time it came knocking, it wouldn't be with rumors. It would be with something bigger. And this time, everyone was watching. The legend of Elvis Presley never really ended with his death. It just morphed. From the moment that announcement hit in 1977, people started questioning it. Some said they saw him at a gas station weeks later. Others claimed he faked it all to escape the pressure. Over the years, the sightings kept stacking up. Different towns, different states, but always the same whisper. Elvis didn't die. He disappeared. It would be easy to dismiss that as a conspiracy theory fueled by tabloids and overactive imaginations. But beneath it, there's something deeper, something emotional. Because Elvis wasn't just a singer, he was a symbol. For millions of people, he represented a time when life felt fuller, more alive, more magical. So the idea that he might still be out there, somewhere somehow, offered comfort, closure, a kind of hope. That's the backdrop Bob Joyce walked into without ever meaning to. He didn't try to imitate Elvis. He didn't wear rhinestones or style his hair in a pompadour. He just opened his mouth and sang. And what came out stopped people in their tracks. The tone, the texture, the phrasing. For die-hard Elvis fans, it was uncanny. Too uncanny to be coincidence. And once that comparison took hold, there was no pulling it back. Videos of Bob singing gospel songs went viral, not just because they were beautiful, but because people were convinced they were hearing Elvis's voice again. His speaking voice, his stage presence, even his physical features. Every detail was picked apart, overanalyzed, and stitched into a narrative Bob never asked for. Suddenly, Bob wasn't just a pastor anymore. He was a vessel for something much bigger than himself. But here's the thing most people don't think about. When fans project that kind of hope onto someone, they stop seeing the person in front of them. They see a dream, a memory, a ghost. And Bob felt that. He felt it in the way people looked at him, not as a shepherd of a congregation, but as a man carrying a legend. He felt it when strangers traveled hours just to sit in the back pew and cry quietly during worship. Not because of the sermon, but because of who they thought they were watching. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't even disrespectful. It was deeply human. People want to believe in miracles. And in a world that often feels chaotic and cruel, the idea that Elvis Presley found redemption through God and is still out there singing, well, that's powerful. But it's also heavy. Bob never said, "I'm Elvis." But over time, he had to answer questions no pastor should have to. He had to navigate conversations about a man he never met, a legacy he never claimed, and an identity that was never his. He carried it all with grace. But make no mistake, there was a personal cost. Because being mistaken for a legend might sound flattering, but it comes with pressure, with expectations, with scrutiny, and most of all with the constant burden of being misunderstood. Bob Joyce wasn't haunted by a ghost in the spooky sense. He was haunted by what Elvis meant to other people and what they needed him to be. And in trying to remain true to his own calling, he found himself in the strange position of being revered for the very thing he was not. That's the real curse of celebrity. Not the fame, not the fortune, but the erasure of self. And for Bob Joyce, that struggle was far from over. As the rumors grew louder and Priscilla's words continued to circulate, something changed. What started as a fan theory morphed into something more aggressive. Bob Joyce wasn't just being mistaken for Elvis anymore, he was being accused. Not by everyone, of course, but there were voices, loud ones, who began painting him as a fraud, a con man, a performer pretending to be someone else for attention or worse, for money. They called it exploitation. Said he was feeding off Elvis's name, letting the myth flourish for his own gain. Never mind that Bob had never marketed himself as anything but a preacher. Never mind that he'd made no documentaries, no albums with hidden messages, no claims of reincarnation. It didn't matter. Because once people decide you're part of a conspiracy, your silence starts to look like proof. And that's where things turned ugly. For Bob, the emotional toll was immense. To be accused of deception when your entire life is built on truth is one of the deepest kinds of pain. He wasn't trying to profit off Elvis's memory. He was trying to lead people to Christ. But now his sermons were being dissected, his motives questioned, his faith doubted. And in all of this, something dangerous was happening. Elvis's legacy, once cherished, became a weapon after Priscilla's words were twisted to attack Bob. Though she sought closure, others used her statement to label him a fraud. Bob responded not with anger but with scripture, teaching about false witness, forgiveness, and grace. He framed the conflict as a spiritual battle against judgment and gossip, quoting Proverbs, "A gentle answer turns away wrath." Bob never claimed or denied being Elvis, as his purpose was never to revive a legend but to honor a higher name. Through it all, his integrity remained unshaken. Still, the pressure remained. The tension between myth and ministry, between public curiosity and private conviction. And somewhere in all of this, a deeper truth began to rise. Maybe this wasn't about Elvis at all. Maybe it was about the stories we cling to, and the ones we try to rewrite when reality doesn't give us the ending we hoped for. Bob Joyce never asked to be in this story, but he stayed in it, with faith, with patience, and with a quiet kind of courage that's easy to miss, but impossible to ignore. And for Priscilla, the storm she stirred might have started with control, with the urge to defend a legacy, but it ended somewhere completely unexpected. Because what followed wasn't scandal or chaos. It was something much quieter and strangely powerful. In the middle of internet arguments, viral videos, and growing tension, another feeling started to surface. Not anger, not certainty, but grace. This story was never really about whether Bob Joyce is Elvis. It was about something deeper: healing, forgiveness, and unexpected peace. For Pastor Bob, redemption isn't dramatic. It's found in quiet sermons, humble prayers, and steadfast devotion to his calling. While the world debates his identity, he focuses not on Elvis's legacy, but on God's light. What draws people to Bob isn't the rumor. It's the sincerity in his voice, the comfort he offers. He isn't performing, he's living his truth. As for Priscilla, she spent decades guarding Elvis's legacy, balancing love for him with the burden of his fame. She was once just a girl who loved a man the world never let her have to herself. Now perhaps it's not about protecting his memory, but finally letting go, trusting that what's real will endure, with or without defense. Her words may not have been an attack, but an exhausted plea, a moment of reclaiming the man she once knew. And Elvis? His spirit lives on, not in debate, but in the grace and truth that outlast it all. Well, he's gone. That part's not a mystery. But the man, the soul behind the stage, still lives on in ways nobody could have predicted. In the songs we still sing, in the memories fans carry, and, strangely enough, in the voice of a pastor who never asked to be compared. Bob's life reflects the very things Elvis once sang about: redemption, faith, heartbreak, hope. And maybe that's the connection that matters. Not a DNA match, not a secret identity, but the resonance of spirit. Because some legacies aren't about fame, they're about meaning. And if Elvis's legacy still stirs hearts today, maybe it's not because he might be alive, but because the spirit of what he represented still echoes. In voices like Bob's, in moments of mystery, in stories that remind us of what we've lost and what we still long for. So maybe the real question isn't, is Bob Joyce Elvis? Maybe the question is, what are we still trying to find in Elvis? Peace, faith, forgiveness? Maybe we're not looking for the man. Maybe we're looking for the message, and maybe we found it. In a church, in a song, in a preacher who never asked for attention but carried the weight of it anyway. With grace, because that's the part that matters most. Grace isn't loud, it's not flashy, it doesn't demand applause, but it survives the spotlight, and sometimes it even grows stronger under it. So, what do you believe? Is Pastor Bob Joyce a man misunderstood, or a man caught in the shadow of a legend? Is this just coincidence, or something more mysterious? Maybe that's the beauty of it. You don't have to decide right now. You just have to feel something. And if this story stirred something in you, curiosity, emotion, faith, then it did what stories are meant to do. So tell us, what do you think? Drop a comment below. We read every one, and if you thought this was wild, wait until you hear what Lisa Marie Presley said before her passing. That video's coming next. so make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because this story, it's far from over.